Hello my amazing people, and welcome back to my channel. If you're back, it has been a while. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Shayna and I have a missing persons case for you all today. Today we're going to be talking about the disappearance of Toni Danielle Clark, who was a senior in high school when she went missing after a very suspicious car accident. And this case really does not have very much information out there about it. I actually found this case by looking around on Reddit, trying to find some information about missing persons who could potentially benefit from a video like this being made. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Toni Danielle Clark was born on June 4th, 1972, and there's not a ton of information on the life that she led up until the night that she went missing, but we do know that she lived in San Bruno, California, and she was a talented athlete. After moving from San Mateo High School, where she was a member of the Black Student Union Club, Toni became a member of the track team at Peninsula High School. But aside from track, she was a passionate swimmer and dancer who loved nothing more than spending time with her friends, and I also know that she had great relationships with her family as well. So in early March of 1990, Toni got the surprising news that she was pregnant. She had a boyfriend at the time, and the two of them found out that they were pregnant, and this was, I'm sure I can imagine, at least shocking for her at the age of 17. About 2 months along is when the disappearance took place, which is really unfortunate. So on the evening of March 16th of 1990, she got into her boyfriend's car, which was a 1979 Chevy Camaro, and this car was notorious for having issues at this time. It would stall, it wouldn't turn over, the engine wouldn't start, it was having a lot of problems. But she hopped into this car and she went to go visit her cousin who lived in Oakland, California, which was about 29 miles away from where she lived. After this visit with her cousin, she hopped back in the car and, as per usual, had issues getting the engine to turn over, so she had a family friend help her get the car started, and after a few attempts, she was on her way back home to where she lived in San Bruno. Just before midnight, the Camaro pulled onto the San Francisco Bay Bridge, where it ended up stalling again about 15 minutes into her journey back home. Shortly after stalling, another vehicle rear-ended the Camaro, which caused it to be pushed into the barricade on the side of the bridge, and authorities were called and responded pretty swiftly and got to the scene within 6 minutes of the call. But when they got there, they were a little bit confused. They found that there was no driver for the Camaro. The only person who was on the scene was a man who had slammed into it and was still present, but Toni was nowhere to be found. So they really weren't sure what to make of the scene. They looked around the outside and the inside of the Camaro to try to find some form of identification or evidence. They were able to find her purse, a cassette player, car keys, and a bracelet that Toni was known for always having on her person. And this stuff was sitting on the passenger side of the vehicle. There was no blood, there was no sign of foul play anywhere in or around the car, and there was no sign of a struggle. So it was a little bit perplexing, and I'm sure the people on the scene were wondering where she might be. The initial theory that police were considering and looking into was one in which Toni was possibly standing in front of the vehicle at the time of the impact by the other car, and when the other car rear-ended the Camaro, it hit Toni and she somehow flew off the side of the bridge. The U.S. Coast Guard got involved right away, and there was a search done in the waters below the bridge, but there was absolutely no sign of Toni and also no sign of any of her belongings, any of her clothing, nothing. I have information here that the distance from where the bridge is to the water is approximately 190 feet depending on the time of the year. At that distance, she would have been unlikely to survive the fall, but it is possible for her body to have never been recovered after falling into the water, if that is what happened, if she actually did fall over the edge of the bridge. Toni's story got very little media attention in the days and the weeks and months that followed her disappearance. There was an article that was done by the San Francisco Examiner, who published on March 20th, mentioning that Toni had disappeared, but it didn't include a photo of her, which would be incredibly important in a missing persons case. And then 2 days after that, another article ran with the headline of, quote, "Drowning Considered," end quote. This article was shorter than the other article that I mentioned, and it also didn't feature a photo. Post-production, Shayna here. As I'm editing this video, I just want to emphasize that it was very clear that the police had made up their minds about what happened to Toni. The media also went forward with these articles, doubling down on the idea that Toni had fallen off the bridge, even though there was no evidence to support that. So in the event that something else did happen to Toni, for example, if she were kidnapped and maybe at this point was still alive when these articles were published, people seeing an article saying "drowning considered" and with no photograph automatically means that they are unlikely to keep their eyes peeled for this person because they are assuming that they're no longer alive. If the article had read something along the lines of "missing person" or "unsolved disappearance" or something along those lines and also had a photo, people would have had in their minds, okay, this person is missing. Let me maybe keep my eyes peeled or think back to anything that they saw that day that could have stood out as suspicious. Again, I just want to say it is possible that she did fall off the bridge, but with no evidence, to say that that happened with absolute certainty is irresponsible. Back to the video. So even though there was no real evidence to point to the fact that, or to the idea that Toni had fallen off the side of the bridge, it seemed like police were really going with this theory that this car hit her car, and because she was standing in front of her car, or her boyfriend's car, I should say, she fell off the side of the bridge and furthermore wasn't found. That seemed like what the police were going with, but we will talk about the fact that her mom was not on board with this idea. Her mom was certain that maybe she had been kidnapped or some other foul play was involved, but that Toni was very much alive. But with the theory in mind that she did fall off the bridge from being rear-ended by the other driver, police decided to pursue charges against the man who was driving this other car. The man who was driving this other vehicle was 21-year-old Jesse Castaneda, and in November of 1990, he was charged with vehicular manslaughter, tailgating, and driving over the speed limit. He eventually turned himself in and entered a plea of not guilty. The prosecution was relying on information from witness testimony. There was another driver on the road that night who told police that they saw a person standing in front of the Camaro around the time or before the time that the accident was believed to have happened. So with this information, the prosecution alleged that this person standing in front of the vehicle was Toni, and that therefore when Castaneda hit the Camaro, it hit Toni and she fell off the bridge. So they were using this information to help with their case. But as I'm sure you may be thinking, this is hardly concrete proof. It's very possible that this witness had their, Toni's best interests at heart, but because there was no body, we really had no way of knowing for sure if this testimony was accurate, if Castaneda hit the car and then subsequently hit Toni. Now, when Toni's mother, Gwen Clark, was called to the stand, she was adamant that her daughter had been kidnapped. She specifically mentioned something about a cult in Oregon, and it's unclear what made her believe that this cult was involved in kidnapping Toni, but it turned out that she had a reason for believing that her daughter was still alive. About a week after the incident on the bridge, Gwen receives a chilling phone call where on the other end she can hear who she believes is Toni crying in the phone, and this call lasts for about 40 seconds before the other end clicks. Gwen was certain that this was her daughter, and a mother would know their daughter's voice, and she was certain that this wasn't someone trolling, this wasn't someone trying to mislead her. She was certain that this was her daughter. When the jury went to deliberate, they ultimately found Jesse Castaneda not guilty. There was no body, so there was a really big challenge in proving that he was responsible for manslaughter because there was no proof that Toni had passed away after falling off of the bridge or that she had fallen off of the bridge at all. So he was found not guilty of vehicular manslaughter, but that kind of left the case open-ended. Because Gwen felt so adamant that her daughter had been kidnapped and was still alive, she spent a lot of time walking around the neighborhood and putting up missing persons flyers. And it was really unfortunate because she would put up these flyers, and then when she would go to make her rounds again, she would see that all of them had been torn down. In 1994, Gwen told the Fresno Bee, quote, "My baby is alive. I haven't felt like she's dead. This is not wishful thinking. I've prayed so long and so hard every day. If she were dead, I would feel it," end quote. So could it be a mother's wishful thinking? Possibly, but it's also possible that she is right and that Toni is still alive, because it was never proven that she isn't. But another thing that I do want to talk about is there were witnesses who came forward to say that they saw an African American male under the car, like making an attempt to fix the vehicle. And there were also reports that there was a male who was walking from the scene where the car was ultimately found. So there was speculation online that I saw that people think that maybe Toni was kidnapped before she even made it to the bridge, and that someone else had her car, and when it stalled out, they got out of the car, maybe tried to fix it, and when they realized they couldn't get it to run again, they just abandoned it there, which would explain why the keys were left in the car, and unfortunately would also explain why Toni's bracelet was taken off of her and found in the car. Because if she got into an accident, she wouldn't have taken off her bracelet. This bracelet that her family said she literally never removed from her person. We all have that one thing. Like, I pretty much never take this necklace off unless I absolutely have to. So if I got into a car accident and this was on the passenger seat, it just wouldn't make a ton of sense. It would make people question, like, okay, what exactly happened here? So I understand why some people would speculate that foul play happened before the car even made it to the bridge. I can see why that would be a plausible idea in people's minds. I really wish that there was more information about Castaneda's testimony. I wish that there was more out there about what he said, the things he saw, after he hit the car. Did he see someone standing in front of the car before he rear-ended it? Like, what information did this person have? Because what this person did or did not say would, help us kind of maybe put the pieces together about what happened. So I hope that Gwen's gut feeling is correct. I hope that Toni is still alive somewhere. And I hope that someone out there has information. There is someone who saw something. In every missing persons case that I've covered, I've always felt that way. There's someone who saw something. There has to be. I do want to let you guys know a little bit about her. On the day that she went missing, she was wearing a black tube top, a light colored jean jacket, and black linen shorts. And she also had on white loafers with a gold ring. She had a gap between her two front teeth, and both of her ears were pierced. And she also had a scar on her right knee as well as a mole on her right calf. Her eyes were brown and her hair was dark brown. Here's an age progression photo created by the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. This is what Toni would have looked like at 36 years of age. She was a pretty petite person, about 5'3" tall and 110 pounds when she disappeared. And if still alive today, she would be around this height of about 5'3". But please take a mental note of this age progression and commit it to memory if you can. If you have any information regarding Toni Clark's disappearance, please contact the San Bruno Police Department at 650-616-7100. I will have this number in the description box below for your reference. I know that it's extremely frustrating when we talk about cases that have so little information, and it can be a little bit confusing because a lot of what we talk about is speculation. But I am curious to hear what you think in the comment section below. I am interested in getting a dialogue about this case started because the more people who hear about it, the higher chance of resolution. And even though this was so long ago, she would be younger than my parents today. So why would we not try to find answers for her? Maybe I'm biased because I personally tend to side with the mother in these types of situations, because even though I don't have any kids myself, a mother's intuition is almost always right. Like when I tell you, my mom has very rarely been wrong about people, situations, things like that. And the people in my life that I know in general who are moms, their intuition is always on point. So I think for that reason, I tend to side with whatever the mother thinks in these types of situations, or the parents in general. But she made a great point that it's possible that Toni was kidnapped. The way that the bracelet was sitting on the passenger seat in the cars, the keys were sitting on the passenger seat. If Toni was driving this vehicle and got out to try to look under the hood, or to try to fix the car, or she got out to walk to maybe get help, why would she leave the keys on the passenger side? She wouldn't. She would have taken the keys with her. You never get out of your car and leave your keys in the car if the car's off. It's just, you know, kind of a natural habit to take your keys with you. So that is also something to think about. It has literally been over a year since I've uploaded a video, and it's just been sitting on my heart really heavily lately that I need to get back into this and really focus on cases that are unsolved, or cases where I'm directly working with family members. I have worked with family members on some videos in the past. It just felt more aligned with what I want and what my ultimate goals are for this channel, to really help in that way. I want to focus on people whose cases are not solved yet, so there, you know, is potential resolution from the making of the video, or people whose family I get to work with. I'm, you know, in the process of figuring everything out, but I definitely am committed to getting back started and trying to figure out how I can best do that. So I definitely feel a little bit rough being in front of the camera again. You know, I think I've kind of lost some of my flow, if you will. Definitely lost some of my comfort being in front of the camera, but I am happy to be here again. I am excited to kind of take this channel in a direction where I feel a sense of purpose with it, because, and not that I didn't feel it before, because I definitely did, but just a more, I guess, specific vision. Either way, I'm just happy to be back. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace.